Hello, everyone. Happy Friday, and thank you for joining us on our second Sage Intacct webinar of the year. Latest updates in the Sage Intacct 2019 Release 2. My name is Tracy Shaver, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm just going to briefly go over how to use the webinar console. The orange arrow on the right will let you toggle the control tray open or closed. At the bottom of the control tray, you will see a chat window. Please feel free to submit questions at any time throughout the webinar for our presenters via the chat function. We will have a Q&A later if there's time, but if we don't get to any questions today, we'll make sure to respond to your questions after the webinar. As for audio settings, on your GoToWebinar console, you should see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please use the Use Telephone option. And if you're using your computer speaker, please select the Use Mic Speakers option. Additionally, I would like to note that this webinar will be recorded. We will also be sending out the slides with a link to the on-demand recording of this webinar within 48 hours. Please keep an eye out for this email if you're interested in viewing the webinar after today or sharing it with any of your team members who couldn't make it today. We are also offering CPE today with today's presentation. To qualify, you must use a personal computer, no smartphones, and log in with your own information and unique URL. Be logged into our online software for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled time frame of the webinar. Actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions, and also complete the evaluation survey at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. First up, we have Brenda. Brenda is a senior manager in the consulting department at Armanino with a specialization in Sage Intacct. She has over 20 years of accounting experience in Big Four public accounting and in-house as a controller, where she led a Sage Intacct implementation for a large global nonprofit. We also have Irene, also a senior manager in the consulting department at Armanino with a specialization in Sage Intacct. Irene has over 30 years of accounting experience and has been involved in implementing accounting software solutions throughout her career. She has presented on accounting topics, functionality, and business improvement, and she has spoken nationally at conferences, including the Sage Intacct Advantage Conference. It's so great to have you both here today, and with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Brenna to get us started with our learning objectives and our agenda for the day.
Excellent. As a reminder, or if you haven't joined our webinars yet this year, we are now offering CPE for our webinars. So in accordance with that, we've got some learning objectives. So today we're going to experience some of the new features available in Action UI and learn how to leverage them. Examine ways to automate our month-end periodic allocations and eliminate post-period adjustments. Evaluate the filtering options available on the Pay Bills screen, only available in the Action UI, and investigate new permissions and bank reconciliations to allow for additional controls and security. We've got a lot of other things on tap for you as well. So here is our agenda for today. We've got updates in this release in these 12 areas, quite a lot today. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. User experience. So you guys have probably already seen a lot of this stuff because you're in Intacct every day and using it. So the transition to Action UI will take place on July 12th. For right now, you'll notice that that button, switch to Legacy UI and switch into Action. The switch back into Legacy has moved. So it used to be right beside your name, and now it's a drop down underneath your name. They want to make it less obvious that you can switch back and forth, that once you get there, hopefully you'll just want to stay. But if you do find yourself in the Legacy user interface, you'll still have that big blue button to switch back into the Action UI. If you are switching back into the Legacy, they have started a new process where if you're switching back into the Legacy UI, you will need to give a reason why you are switching back. And I took a screenshot of that screen for you on the right-hand side here so that they can get some feedback from you on why you might be switching back because it is going to become the default on July 12th. Pretty exciting. I've been using it almost exclusively for the last year and a half. So it'll be nice to have everybody on the same platform, which of course means they've probably started working on the next one already. Some additional enhancements for anybody that has been using the favorites menu. If you haven't been using the favorites menu so far, definitely go and check it out. If you're using the regular menus, everything when you hover over items on the regular menus in Intacct, you'll see an outline of a gray star on the right-hand side of that menu line item. And you can click that menu line item and click that star to make it gold, and that will add it to your favorites list. So your favorites list was just one big list of everything, but now they've added a module switcher to the favorites list, so you can look at everything all in one big large list, organized however you like, or you can look at everything by module specifically. You can still drag and drop those favorites from anywhere within to make sure that you can get them in the order you like, alphabetical, workflow, number of characters, whatever makes you happy. One of the other things, so the entity picker for multi-entity environments actually came out with the Action UI, but because there was no drop down next to the circles that had the colors in them, a lot of people didn't realize that this was actually a feature. So now they've made it a little bit more obvious by adding that drop down in the entity picker so that you can see all of the colors. And they've also added the ability to set custom colors. In addition to that, they've sorted your entity list so that you can see your most recently last used 5 entities, and it allows you to also do type ahead if you have more than 10 entities. I know we've definitely implemented organizations that have hundreds of entities, so this can make it much easier for you to switch if you do have a long list there. Oh, I think we skipped one. Maybe no, next. So some other Action UI enhancements. They have been slowly converting all of the configuration pages within the system. And as they're converting each of these configuration pages to the Action UI, they're reviewing all of the terminology and things that they have been using. For example, on the general ledger, there's a configuration setting that if there is a GL posting date in the future, and your options previously were do nothing, warn, or do not allow transactions to be created. And so now they've updated those options to be allow and do not warn, which corresponds to do nothing. Warn is now going to be allow and warn. And don't allow transactions to be created is going to be do not allow. So they've really tried to kind of clarify some of the configuration settings to really indicate what it's going to allow you to do. Because of course, us as implementers fully understand those, but sometimes when you're looking at those later, it's not immediately clear whether or not, changing that setting is going to fix, whatever issue you're experiencing that was causing you to look at the configuration in the first place. So those are all really nice enhancements. On the general ledger standard reports, and you may also notice that some of the options for the report have moved from the filter section to the format section because they were determined to really be more format related as opposed to filtering data out of the section. So all the options are still there, but they may have moved around. So something for you to be aware of. And then our last Action UI enhancement, kind of more on the default entity colors. So this was actually pretty hidden in the release notes, and we actually stumbled across it. But now when you're setting up your entities, you have the option to set up a default color for your entities and for the top level. And this color is going to apply to all of the users in the system that have not already set their personal colors. So if you've already set your personal colors and you go and set the default colors, their personal colors are still going to override it. But for anybody that hasn't set their colors yet, you can go in and set the entity ones are on the entity record and the company ones are under the company information setting, so that you can set those defaults so that new users, when they're set up, are still going to have that color differentiation between the various entities and the top level. So that's a really, really helpful update there. All right, and with that, I think we're into polling question number 1.
Great, thanks, Brenda. So up on your screen, you will see our first polling question of the day. Have you started using the new bank reconciliation workflow? Please select 1, yes, no, or not sure. There is no correct answer, but please remember, if you did join late and you do want that CPE credit, you do need to answer at least 75% of the polling questions today. Also for this one, if you want to put some comments in, if you have started using it, also if you haven't, we'd love to know why. And I will cut the polling question now. So Brenda or Irene, if you have any questions on our results, we have them up here.
Perfect. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. This is Irene. All right. So it looks like 17% have started using the new bank rec, 66% not sure. I'm sorry, no, and 17% not sure because maybe it's not your job responsibility at your company. Good to know. It is a great new reconciliation workflow. We're going to be talking about it here in a few minutes. So maybe it'll intrigue you to get using that new bank reconciliation feature. Let's talk about the new features in this release related to General Ledger. A very, very nice feature is the ability to now prevent direct journal entries to your control accounts. All right, huge benefits to this, right? Because this is going to help ensure that your subledger and the GL accounts remain in balance for control accounts like accounts payable, accounts receivable, intercompany, credit cards, whatever control account you might have. So if you go into General Ledger, you click on Edit of a General Ledger account, you're going to see this Disallow Direct Posting. If you check that box, then users may not select this particular account in any of their transactions, journal entries, etc. So really nice feature. I bet several of you are going to start using that right out of the chute. Also related to General Ledger, of course, are dynamic allocations, which is a separate module, but we put this under our General Ledger area. You have the ability now to add attachments in dynamic allocations, which is really nice. Also, the basis expansion allows you to use balance sheet accounts and cumulative balance statistical accounts in any of your basic calculations. So that's a nice enhancement. Also, month-end automation with all of the recurring allocations. So you can see there a schedule on that screenshot. You can actually schedule and make that allocation happen exactly when you need it to happen. And of course, an email there, that email address. If something fails, you want to make sure and fill that email address in so you get notification if that recurring allocation fails. Very similar to recurring journal entries, actually. The third enhancement is a nice one, and that is the ability to be able to post to user-defined books in the order entry module. All right, so we've always been able to do it with purchasing transactions, okay, of certain types. Well, now we can actually do it in order entry as well. Yay, this is great. We've been waiting for this for a while. So if you were implemented and you've been using it and you didn't have that ability before, know that it's now available. So user-defined books, great feature functionality in Intacct, and the ability now to use order entry to post to user-defined books. Brenda, back over to you on accounts payable.
All righty. Thanks, Irene. So if you haven't been using the new Action UI, then you haven't been using the new Pay Bills feature. It's the biggest reason to switch to Action UI in my opinion. If not for the amazing way that it applies credits so much easily to much more easily than the old way, which pro rata spread your credits to all your line items. This one, the Action UI makes it really easy to apply credits, but also because there's some nice features, and this is one of them, the filter bills to pay feature here. So with this release, when you come into this screen, you're not going to see any bills any longer. And the reason why is because by default, it only shows 1,000 bills. So if you are in very high volume AP and have more than 1,000 bills in there at any given time, you're not going to ever see all of your bills, and so it's really easy to not pay them. So they really want to make sure that you are using the filters to filter down your list below 1,000 records so that you can see all of your records that are in there. For many of our clients on the call today, it's not an issue because you don't have check runs of more than 200 invoices. So definitely the 1,000 is not going to be a problem. What I wanted to talk about today was really that the filter is not only just a filter, but it can also be used to sort data. Unlike most screens in Intacct, the pay bills screen is a workflow. It's not a data entry screen. On workflow screens, similar to like your deposit screen in cash or accounts receivable, you can't click on the headings in order to sort them. So the only way that you can sort it is by adding a filter. And so the most common filter that folks are adding is going to be sort by vendor name. By default, the list is going to sort by invoice due date. So sometimes you want to see everything for one vendor together so you can determine, do I have any duplicates in there? Do I want to pay everything? Do we have anything on hold? All of those questions. So you can click into the filter by. If you click in that drop down where it says select an advanced filter, you'll have the option to either select filters that have been created already, or you'll also have the option to create a new one. The basic filters are the due date range and the vendor range that are here by default. If you want to filter on anything else, you'll have to do an advanced filter. So that's a really nice feature there. All right, back to you, Irene. Talk about our bank recs.
Yeah, right. So based on the fact that the polling question, quite a few of you using it, quite a few still not. One of the cool things that Intacct added in this release is the ability to segregate duties and allow a different person to actually click the reconcile button. Again, this is only available in the new Action UI, in the new bank rec, so maybe that'll be a reason to switch over to that new bank rec. So you can have one person, complete the bank reconciliation, get it all in balance, and then a controller or someone else come in, review it, and actually click the reconcile button. Great for separation of duties. Another one is automatically matching reversed and voided payments when you're using the import feature. So Intacct in the new bank reconciliation screen, there is an option to filter under that more filters section to filter your voided and reversed payments and check them off, but now currently it will actually mark those off automatically. It'll read those that say reversed and voided and actually mark those off during the import feature. So again, just streamlining time, saving you guys time, streamlining the process, right, and making it easier. So that's a nice new feature there. And also, a couple things, just some call outs here. You can go back and forth between the new and the old bank reconciliation screens. Obviously, the old bank one's probably going to go away pretty soon, but at this point, you can still do that. So you can start the reconciliation in one screen and then go over to the other screen, and all of your information is saved and continue on if for some reason something's not working. The other call out there is I wanted you to know in the old bank reconciliation, if you recall, you could pick and choose what fields to validate when doing the auto match or the auto match with review. Currently on the new bank reconciliation, there's not a way to set this yet. I anticipate it's coming, but we'll see. But currently it is only on the check number or document number and the amount. So it's not doing anything based on the date at this time in the new bank reconciliation screen. All right, projects, Brenda.
All righty. And that's a good call out on the bank recs because you can switch back and forth between the two of them. There's no reason not to start using it. Go check it out, see what it looks like, see if it makes things a little bit easier for you. There's no reason not to. All right, and projects. So projects, just a quick update here on transaction. Oh, what happened there? Back to this on transaction rule filters. So if you are doing timesheets in Intacct, transaction rule filters have an update to be able to be applied to only billable timesheet line items. Oftentimes there's additional transaction rules, gross up, and things we want to do to billable line items that we don't necessarily need to do to our internal line items for billing purposes. So you can see on the right-hand side that now we've got a billable checkbox, and we can select it if we're going to apply this rule to only billable transactions. If you want it to apply to all transactions, you're going to leave that box unchecked and it will apply to everything. At this time, there is no way to apply transaction rules to only non-chargeable time. Although if you have that use case, let's talk about it. We could probably figure out a way around it. All right. Contracts.
Great. Contracts module, more and more companies starting to use this module, a very powerful module. It's been around a few years now, and they're really putting a lot of focus and effort into it. And every release, they do a few new things that really help manage the process. So one of the new features in this release is the ability to categorize contracts with new contract types. So you can go in, you can identify your specific list of contract types that you want to be able to tag contracts with. And then you can assign it to a contract when you're setting up that contract or when it's coming over in an integration, however that's working. And then it can be used as a filter when you're generating invoices. So a nice way to organize your contracts and be able to group those together, report on those, use those in the generate invoice screen. So very nice feature there. Another one is there is now an estimated variable consideration for time and material projects. This is obviously only available if you do have the contract dimension populated in the project module. And of course, you would have to have the project module as well. So if you have both projects and contract, this would work. It cannot be disabled once it is enabled. So once it's turned on, you cannot turn it back off. And what it does is it removes the project time and materials option, and it replaces it with project time and project materials billing method. So it really segregates that out, right? If you need variable consideration for those two types of things on a time and materials project. If you use those options, if you turn this on, then each time that you do a time and material project, you will be required to do 2 contract lines in order to invoice all possible billable transactions. Okay. And there is a new revalue estimation option in the More Actions menu. I should have put a screenshot of that there, apologize. But the revalue estimation is a new option then related to this as well. The other enhancement in the contract module is you can bill projects at percent complete threshold levels. Okay, so you would set up a template type of project percent complete, or you could use the task percent complete option. There's a new checkbox, step billing. So you would select that step billing checkbox, and then you'll use the template details to actually go in and map the threshold percent to the percent to bill. You can see that illustrated in the steps there. And there's a good example in the new release notes. I just copied this in here rather than trying to come up with an entire scenario of my own, because this is a really good example, right? So we've got we put in our percents based on that information in the prior screen, and then this tells you exactly what's going to happen. So when the project is 35% complete, invoice 30% of the flat fee fixed amount. Okay. When the project is 65%, invoice an additional 30%, and then when it's 100% complete, invoice the remaining 40%. So as you can see by that example, it's giving us the ability to pick and choose based on what percent it is complete, invoice a different percent. We don't have to have that one-to-one match relationship. Okay? So those are some nice new features. And let's go ahead and ask another polling question. Tracy?
All right, great. Thanks, Irene. So for our polling question number 2, what aspects of the release do you feel will be most beneficial to your organization? Please select one. Again, there is no wrong answer. Labeling entities by color, preventing direct posting to control accounts, billable transaction rules filter for projects, billing contracts at percentage complete milestones, or other. And if you do have an other, feel free to put that in the comments. We'd love to see what that is. And just as a reminder, we will be sending out this webinar with the slides. If you guys want to reference all the information today or send it to your colleagues. And we'll give one more second here and close the polls. And here's our results.
All right. It looks like most of you are going to immediately go over to your general ledgers and check that box so that you don't have any more reconciling issues between your submodules and your general ledger, or that you don't have anybody posting directly to accounts you don't want them posting directly to, like retained earnings or net assets. So that can be really good. And it looks like some other folks are really looking forward to that labeling by color as well. All right.
Great, thank you. Brenda, next section.
All right, inventory, everybody's favorite topic. So continuing with, all the inventory, they've been doing lots of inventory updates in Intacct over the last couple years, slowly, inching it forwards. First we've had landed costs and replenishment updates, all different valuation methods. And so they're just going deeper in some of these features in this particular release. So when they first introduced replenishment for the automatic restocking, they supported only 2 replenishment methods: demand forecast by a single value or at a reorder point. So if you knew what your forecast was, you could say, I want you to order 25 things per month, or I want you to reorder something on July 15th. So with this release, they've now added a third method, demand forecast by fluctuating values. So this supports the use of a fluctuating demand. So if you have seasonal demand, or it goes up in certain days of the week, or things like that, depending on what kind of an inventory you're running, you now have the ability to do that. So the new replenishment fluctuating demand forecast page, that's a bit of a mouthful there, lists all of the items that have a fluctuating demand forecast. So that's what you're seeing of the screenshot here on the left-hand side. So you can use that page as a central place, work off all of your forecasts. You can add, edit, import, export, all of the things there. And then when you click into the add or the edit, you'll get the screenshot that's on the right-hand side. And from this page, you can update your forecast quantity. Looks like in this example, they're doing it kind of bi-weekly, or weekly almost. It looks like weekly. So you can have a different replenishment forecast for each week, depending on that seasonality or demand. So the sum of the forecast quantities with the dates during the time period between the as of date on the replenishment inventory page, plus the vendor's lead time, is going to represent the demand during the vendor lead time. So when you're looking at those things, and the fluctuating forecast for the item is only going to be used when you have the fluctuating values. So if you've built this table, but then you change the replenishment method, the table will still be there, but it will not be being referenced. Important call out. So a little bit more on replenishment, lots of stuff going on here. So for this one, the replenishment method fields in both the vendor history tab and the details area have been updated. So I just wanted to show you some screenshots for that. So this is also another way that you can get to that forecast. So when you put the demand forecast by fluctuating values, you're going to get that button. under the view forecast, and you can click on that and you can go right to that add edit forecast page. So it's also been updated. The second screenshot on the bottom there is the inventory control update. So you can update it there as well. So a lot of places that you can see what the forecast is, and also make sure that everything is internally consistent and up to date there. So with the replenishment updates, they also made a good warehouse enhancement. So previously, when you were replenishing your inventory, the page would always display every result for every item and warehouse combination where they were both enabled for replenishment. So if you were only selling that particular item out of one of your warehouses, you would still see the entire list there. And more so, they would have quantities in there. So it was really difficult to know if you didn't have a really good insight into where your inventory was and what warehouse, to accidentally order something for the wrong warehouse. So now there's two new options that they've implemented to prevent warehouses that you don't ever intend to stock or want to stop tracking or stop stocking rather from even appearing in the replenishment results. So that way it's going to limit what you're going to see there, and it'll make it much more easy and of course much more accurate to pick which items to replenish to the correct warehouse. So the first one is we can replenish an item only for warehouses listed in the item record. So you can make that option. That option's on the configure inventory control page and is disabled by default. So that's the picture here on the right hand side. So you'll select this option if you want to have items recommended for reordering only from the warehouses that are listed in the warehouse section of the general tab of your items record. So that's what we're showing here on the left hand side. Otherwise, items are going to be recommended for all warehouses defined in the system that are enabled for replenishment. And the other option is on the left-hand side, enable replenishment for this item warehouse combination. So the option is in the details area for each warehouse listed in an item and is enabled by default. So it will be enabled. This one will be enabled by default, whereas the other one will not be. So you'll deselect this option to prevent the warehouse from being replenished for the item. So if you decided to stop stocking it in that particular warehouse, this is where you would come and uncheck it for that particular item. All right, and a quick landed cost enhancement. So previously, when you entered your actual landed cost, you had to post the transaction and then check the automatically generated inventory adjustment transaction to see how the actual cost was distributed to all the items in the original transaction. So in the above, in the side example, you can see that the actual cost of $110 was entered in for shipping, and the distribution of the cost is based on weight. So 48.89 is going to be added to the value of the small widgets, and 61.11 is added to the value of the large widgets. So the distribution details make it easier and faster to confirm how the actual cost is being distributed amongst the items that you want to use using the method that you want to use. And the details appear when you link the actual cost to the estimate or not. So it can be really helpful to be able to do that all in one place in one step, rather than having to complete the transaction and then go check it and then perhaps go back and make adjustments. So this just makes that workflow a little bit more seamless and a little bit more intuitive, because some folks might, of course, fix those things and forget to go check it, not realizing that it could have been applied incorrectly. All right, Salesforce, back to you, Irene.
Thank you. Salesforce integration enhancements. Many companies are using, of course, the Salesforce integration, so there's always a good few new ones related in this integration. Resyncing managed lists in Intacct. This is mostly used for implementation because, of course, once you're up and live and running, the individual records are synced when they are created or update. But this does give that ability. If you need it at some point, you can just push a trigger button now that will resync all of the managed lists in Intacct. Another enhancement is an update to triggers and validations in Salesforce. So this has to do with the performance by, it's improving in performance because it's replacing event triggers with a new custom visual force component. And that component is going to perform validation tasks, of course, on all of these objects that are listed down below related to Salesforce. There is, you do have to have your administrator has to go in and they have to change a layout in order to be able to see this new option and turn it on, but it is going to be available. And so I think overall, I talked to our Salesforce team about it, and they said it was a good new feature for people that are using these event triggers. So nice feature enhancement there. And that's really about all for Salesforce. So let's go ahead and go into another polling question.
All
Tracy?
right. Thanks, Irene. So for our third polling question of the day, and just as a reminder, to get CPE, you need to answer 75%. So with that, what tool do you use for budgeting? Please select one. Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning, Adaptive Insights, Excel, or other. And please let us know in the comments what that other is. It'll be very beneficial for us and for future updates.
So part of the reason why we're asking this is, as you're probably aware, Intacct to release the Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning module. They've got a lot of release notes that are coming out because they just, put out this technology. And of course, as people start using it, there's all kinds of enhancements. So what we're really looking for here is trying to figure out how much time in these webinars we should be spending on that budgeting and planning tool. But also figured we'd use an opportunity to see what else people are using out there so we can get a good idea if anybody might be interested in this product.
Great. Thank you for the clarification, Brenda, and we'll show the results here.
All right, Excel. That's what I figured everybody was using.
We did get
so
one
that's
person.
really common.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We did get one person who said in the question said host analytics.
Host analytics. That's great. It looks like we got feature one as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. So overwhelmingly, a lot of folks looking at Excel. And one of the nice things I think about the budgeting and planning module is that it's intuitive and it's right priced for the middle market client. So I think it's if you're looking to get off spreadsheets and looking to maybe automate some of those things, we'll talk about some of the features that they've come out with. So if you're just interested in maybe a tool and you're not sure, they do have a training on the tool available in the Learning Center where you can actually just go and click around. It's got these 7 different module sections. You can do them in any order. So if you want to kind of check out and see what it does, it will show you all of the different things. If you're one of those folks that answered that you're already using it and you've got new staff that are coming in, this is a great intro to budgeting to be able to show people what it's like and how to navigate throughout the different modules. So some of the updates that have come out in release 2 here is when this was first released, it could only handle budgets up to 1,000 lines. So with this release, they have tripled the capability to 3,000 lines. And what this means is you can have up to 3,000 account dimension combinations that you're budgeting for in your system. So that's a pretty hefty amount. Most people aren't budgeting for quite that many line items. So this should be able to take care of the majority of folks that are using the system. One of the other nice features is that when you go to pro forma your budget or copy it over, it will automatically remove irrelevant budget lines and budget groups that had no past actuals. So the system will take a look at all of your account combinations that have been booked to in the last 12 months. And if you didn't book any actuals to that budget line item, it will remove it from your future forecast, assuming that you don't need to budget for something that you budgeted for last year but didn't use. In my experience, that sometimes is not the case. You need to budget for it again because you didn't use it last year, that project got pushed off or something. So definitely something for you to be aware of, that it will suppress those. So if you do need to, roll that forward because that project got pushed out, you'll need to add those back in. Previously, when you were importing the actuals into the budget module for reporting, you had to bring in everything every time. And so now with this release, we've got the ability to import actual data from either just one entity or even a single department. So if you want to do some updates or some modeling, or somebody else does, they can update their own stuff and go forward and do some forecasting there. You can also import actuals from an accrual book for multi-entity and multi-currency companies. And you can now use the revenue adjustment template to decrease your revenue budget and enter negative revenue amounts. If you're using this module, you already know you can't enter negative amounts for revenue. All budgeting is done as positive numbers, and the system knows whether it is a debit or a credit by the nature of the account settings itself. So they've now released this revenue adjustment template that will allow you to reduce revenue if you have to make any adjustments to that after the fact. The other thing that I wanted to call your attention to is that Intacct is not listing the full release notes for this product in with all of their other release notes. So if you do have this module, I've included a link here in the notes that you will be able to get this link when we send out this slide deck, and you'll be able to view the full release notes. They are doing more frequent releases on this particular module for bug fixes, error corrections, and things like that. So also those updates are also going to be included in the release notes. You can see here there's been 9 release note articles, even though it was just released in Q4. So there's only been 3 official releases, but there's been some minor interim releases as well. So especially for those of you currently using this module, it'll be good to keep up on those items so you don't get surprised by anything.
All right, perfect.
All right.
Platform services and customizations in Intacct. A few small things, name change, you might have noticed that. It used to be called custom documents. Now it's printed doc templates or printed document template, depending on where you're looking at it. So it's got a little different label, a little more intuitive. As Brenda shared earlier with the new UI, they've done a lot of little things like that throughout to kind of keep making it more user-friendly and make sense, if you will. There's a new status field in customization and platform services that can be used related to your custom document templates. And there are new sample and other updates to the document templates. So here's a list of all of the new samples that they provided. So if you've been somewhat happy with your documents in Intacct that you're printing, purchasing, order entry, etc. You can see in here they've added some additional new samples that are already configured in Word and ready to go with specific information. So you might take a look at those under your printed doc templates now rather than custom docs. For web services, this is always a fun one because I can never read any of the information on this slide because it's all words and fields that are stored behind the scenes, right? But as you know, you can go to the developer.intacct.com blog site. See that there if you ever want to read. It's actually a really good site, you guys, even if you're not doing a lot of things related to programming, API calls, stuff like that, because a lot of times it just gives good information about things that are changing in the background as well. So, but specifically for people who are doing integrations or customization, smart events, smart roles, this will give you an update as to what sorts of things have been changed in the background. All right, global consolidations, I'll just keep going on. Couple small enhancements to global consolidations. One I know is an important one for some of the folks out there, and that is the update to historical rate calculation. So what they did is, and I'll go ahead and show the slide here with the screenshot, on your general ledger, on your journal transactions, right, or your transactions in Intacct, there was the exchange rate date field there. Okay, and so that date automatically populates as the same date as the posting date. So you can actually now change that date, and if you're using historical rate tables, it will look at that date and use that date in those historical rate calculations. It will not go back and recalculate, but of course you can go into consolidations, rerun for a prior period, and of course then it would calculate and do that from there forward. So if you had any issues with that or need that ability to be able to do a different date on the transaction line, which is really nice in the general ledger because that's on every line. So one line item could pull a rate from a different date than another line. So probably not huge demand, but that is available now in the consolidations. Reporting, Brenda.
All righty. So Intacct has been updating their dashboards. So in the last couple of releases, we saw an update to the services quick start and also to the nonprofit quick start. So in this release, they have rolled out these new dashboards to the general quick start. We don't have a lot of clients using the general quick start because the services quick start has more reporting available. But if you are using the general quick start, the tip is that you should go to your dashboards library and install the dashboards first. So installing all the dashboards first will automatically install all of the reports and graphs for you, so you can save yourself a little bit of time. These are not ready to rock and roll necessarily out of the box. If you've used all of the categories in the package exactly how they were intended, it should work pretty well, but it does require a little bit of configuration, so that you need to make sure that everything is configured in terms of filters and accounts, especially if you've renamed or repurposed any of your categories. You want to make sure before you roll these out to the whole organization that everything is ship-shape. If you need any assistance with that, definitely feel free to reach out to us.
All right. Administration, smart events, smart roles, some of those enhancements. So there is a smart event queue. All right. It's called Smart Event Jobs. If you don't see that, if you go into platform services and you don't see that Smart Events Jobs, then that means you don't have permissions. It is a permission to be able to see that in the menu item. All right, so now if you have, let's say that you have a smart event that's happening on a particular transaction, or as you can see here, 3 smart events happening on a particular transaction. Okay, you put the order of how you want those smart events to happen. And in the smart event queue, you can actually view now the history and the details of the process that happened. So we can see here that when this smart event job, when this particular one ran, each smart event went in the order that it was supposed to go, queued, so it's not completed yet, it's still sitting on a queued status, but if it would say failed or success, and if there were any errors, you could read the errors related to that. So that's really nice because it allows you to go back and look at some of the history on that. So smart event jobs in Intacct on your platform services. Enhanced content security policy control. This is something that's found in your company menu on your security tab. And you can go in and you can have, let's say that you have an integration with Intacct and some other software. This particular area of the configuration of security allows your IT guys to go in and enforce security policies to help make sure that that integration doesn't get tapped into, right? So it allows it allows your IT folks to really be able to go in and enforce a policy. A good example, of course, is always with an integration and have specific information. So they've added more things in here to be able to continually help with those integrations to make those more and more secure. So if you have an integration, you might want to share this one with your IT folks if they don't read the release notes on their own. As always, they continue to do good help content updates. This particular release, they focused on fixed assets. So here they went in and they did enhancements on all of the content related, not all of it, but much of the content related to the fixed asset module. Okay, and a tip there on the screen, I wanted you to know that you can file a support case in the community related to help content. So for example, if you are reading the help content on something and it kind of makes sense or it's wrong or it just is not detailed enough, don't hesitate to file a support case and request that maybe they clarify their content or update their content. I've actually found quite a few typos in there that I filed cases for and had them fix those typos. But anyway, so you can,
You can.
Yeah.
I was going to say they can also, down the bottom of each page, there's a question. Was this helpful? Yes or no?
Yes.
And if you say no, you get a little comment box to pop up that says what could be better.
Right.
So even if you don't, if you're still in implementation and you're looking for something and you've got some feedback, you can give them feedback there. You can do it anonymously, but if you leave your name and email address or phone number, somebody from the documentation team will get back to you.
Yeah, so that's a good call out. I should have
So
made
2
that
ways.
tip 1 and tip 2. Yeah. So that's probably the quicker way is just to go down there at the bottom and click that and put in a comment. But don't hesitate to be proactive in that process.
Yeah, we're only going to get better if we all make it better.
That's right. All right. Polling question number 4.
All right, thanks, Irene. So this is our last polling question of the webinar today. Is there something in this release that my organization can use immediately? Pretty easy one here. Select one, true or false. And if you do want to comment, you can comment on what that is exactly. So just a few reminders here while we're wrapping things up. We will be sending this recording out with the slides so you can share and can view at a later time within 48 hours. Also, for CPE, if you haven't answered the questions, you need 75%, so this is your last chance to get that in. And with that, we will close the poll.
You also have to be on the line for at least 50 minutes.
Correct. Yes. Thank you, Brenda. 50 minutes.
That's a good call out.
So we're almost there, but you can't log off right after this question. All right. So the majority of you are finding something that you can use in this release. So that's really great.
Yeah, I think as a call out for that, don't forget to go review and read the release notes yourself. We do our best job to try to highlight everything and get the information in here. But if there may be a few other little hidden gems in there sometimes, right? I think my biggest call out for those listening in is really, just embracing the new Action UI. There are some really cool things you can do in the Action UI. It's a nice once you kind of get used to it. It's hard coming off the old UI. I know sometimes when you've been using it for a really long time, but don't hesitate to just dive in, and the sooner you do it, the sooner you'll be comfortable and it'll be behind you. All right. Did we have any other questions in the queue, Tracy?
Let me check it out here. All right, here I have one for you. Can you use a smart event to populate a field on an accounts receivable invoice that can then be used in the printed invoice?
Oh, good question. Absolutely. That's a great purpose for smart events. Smart event is a trigger. It's an action, right? It's an event. It'll do something. So let's say that there's something on your customer record. So you want to be able to identify something unique on your customer record about your customers, and you want to get that on your AR invoice. And out of the box, you can't do that because the AR invoice doesn't include those custom fields from the customer record. So you could use a smart event that when you saved your AR invoice, Intacct would take the smart event, it would go grab the value in the field that's stored on the customer record, and it would put that value on the actual AR invoice for you. And then you could go ahead then and put it on your printed invoice that goes to your customer. So yes, you can do that. Good question.
Awesome. Thank you, Irene. All right, let me look here. Another good one I think we have here is, can you share AP bill filters that you created with other people?
I think that one's mine. And the answer is yes. So if you've created a vendor sort filter already, then you can share that so everybody can use the same filter. Or if you want to split your vendor list into A through M and N through Z, or however you want to do it, or you want to do it so it's only bills that are due in the next week. So however you want to create those filters, you can deploy or make public the filter, and that will share it with everybody, or you can keep it so it's just your particular filter. So especially if you're a large enough organization that you have multiple AP processors, it may make sense for everybody to have their own filters because they're all processing different things. So in that kind of an instance, they might not need to share it. But if you've got one AP person and somebody else filling in while they're on PTO, you might want to share your filters so they can have the same experience as you. Great question.
Great question. Thank you, Brenda and Irene, for those. So I think I'll give a few more minutes for any last minute questions. Anyone still online want to pop some questions up? We have Irene and Brenda on here for the last 5 minutes. If you guys have any questions about today's content or maybe something unrelated from the content, we'll pop those in. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any and you don't feel comfortable putting them on the screen now, here is Brenda and Irene's contact information. We have both their emails and phone numbers. Feel free to shoot them any questions that you may have about any of the updates, any questions at all about Sage Intacct. So we want to wrap it up by thanking everyone for being here today, and both you and Brenda and Irene for the amazing content shared. Remember to look out for the slides. We will email you this recording and be sending it to you within 48 hours. Feel free to share it with your team, whoever couldn't make it today. Along with that, if you're looking to get that CPE, remember to quickly take this survey at the end of our session here, and our learning and development team will check for those, the 75, the 50-minute accreditations for the CPE, and we'll send those out. And with that, I'd like to thank Brenda and Irene and the audience for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Have a good one, folks.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.